Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the CMMC discussion panel. This is coming to you from the National Veteran Small Business Coalition. We're going to give it just a couple more minutes because I know that there was about 18 attendees that were going to join today, and we are halfway there. So let's just give a couple minutes. Let's say about 2 more, okay? And we'll come back to you on this. Okay, I see that we have some more folks that have just joined, so
Hello?
let's go ahead.
Testing.
Read you loud and clear.
Testing.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We have quite a few discussion points today, and then a lot of discussions around questions and answers that have been coming in around the CMMC, requirements and what's coming down the pipe over the next 5 years. So one of those discussion points is going to be the process of the 800-171 to the DFARS SPRS submission score, which is a requirement in order to move forward with the actual CMMC compliance through the contract aspect. So we're going to discuss that component, the remediation steps to bring your score to 110, the timeline on the CMMC level 3 in calendar year 2021, that process, and then followed on by questions and answers and comments. And go ahead and please start asking questions inside your questions box, and then we'll get to those as soon as we're done. But the first thing I'd like to also do is introduce the whole panel, and I'm going to go ahead and start with Amanda. If you can please introduce yourself, your organization, and your experience and what you bring to the table.
All right, absolutely. Good afternoon. My name is Amanda Gorski. I'm the owner and president of GSEC LLC. I do support for DoD and DHA elements and other components. I bring about 16 years of physical personnel and cybersecurity to the table, and I am glad to be here today.
Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate that. David, you're next, sir.
Yes, thank you. David Malakote, Chief Operations Officer of Cyturus Technologies. Basically, we provide cybersecurity risk consulting as well as assistance. My experience, about 25 years in IT and cybersecurity, Marine veteran, and basically bring to the table a let's say a plethora of skills over the years when it comes to cybersecurity assessment, as well as operating as a CISO.
Excellent.
James, I think you may be muted.
Next, Joshua, please.
Hey everyone, my name is Joshua Duvall. I'm the founder and managing partner of Matros Edwards. I'm a government contracts and cybersecurity attorney, and I focus on helping small to mid-sized government contractors navigate various procurement rules and regulations, and so I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. And then I believe it's Brian, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe Ben. I think it's Ben.
Benjamin. Yeah, your name. You have my name. I don't know how you became my son, but Junior. But I don't.
Sorry about that. So my name is Ben Doyle. I'm a managing principal with Fox Point Solutions. We're an information risk management and consulting firm. I've been in IT risk and compliance for about the last 15 years with a pretty steep technical background. So Fox Point is chiefly they do assessments and audits for compliance, and we're on the path to becoming a C3 PAO in order to do these CMMC assessments.
Excellent. That's good. And then I believe it is William. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's Bill.
Bill.
It's Bill.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, I'm Bill Dunn. I'm the president of Strategic Resilience Group. I'm also a member of the board of the NVSPC. And one of the things we've done to support James is we've brought Saturis as well as Fox Point onto the NVSPC Partners Program to support specifically veteran business getting through this process and getting through it quickly. And I also have from my company Rich Hilber, who's also listed as James Quilty, and he has gone through this. He's going through this process, so he can introduce himself too.
That's the fastest growing family I've ever seen.
I know, they're everywhere.
And Dana.
Hello, my name is Dana Pikas. I'm with ISOP Solutions. I'm currently the president, and my background is ISO. I've been working with different ISO standards since the mid-90s, and ISOP is also a registered RPO and has registered to be a C3 PAO. On top of that, we've just finished our ISO 17021 and our ISO 1702 certifications that are required for the C3 PAOs. So we can answer any questions that may come across with those types of standards that are coming into play.
Excellent. I think we may want to, kind of expand on that 17020 and get some feedback from you on that today.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right into one of our first discussion point, which is the 800-171 to DFARS SPRS submission score. How is that being handled? Who needs to, actually submit to that, and why?
So any government contractor that is supporting DoD or DHA, I believe, for some small facets of it, have to submit their score while following the 800-171 gap analysis checklist that was submitted.
Absolutely. And what happens if you've never done any contracts with the government yet?
So for those folks, since they don't have that established yet in the system on the back end, they can just go ahead and encrypt an email and send that to, I believe it's, there's a website that ends in navy.mil. I'm sure we can post that somewhere that you can submit that via encrypted email.
Absolutely correct. And what I'll go ahead and do is I'll post that into the questions here so that everybody can see that, because that is a requirement. It doesn't matter that you have not done any work with the government yet, but if your goal is to work with the government, you still have to submit to that SPRS. And the alternate way of doing that is by sending this encrypted email to the Navy themselves. And you may have to download the DoD root certificates in order to be able to encrypt that message to them.
And James, I know that originally there was that December 1st deadline for companies to have that submitted. Have they pushed that out or extended, or is it now just on an ASAP basis?
So if you haven't made it at this time, it's still open for you to move forward. I mean, it's a requirement, bottom line. So it kind of has to be extended. If there's new companies that are coming on board or new companies being formed and they want to do government work, you still have to submit to it. So it kind of has to be open, right? I know they had the deadline for December of last year, but if you're a new company or your company decides now to start going after government work, it's still a requirement, still is open, right?
And I will say, James, it's also, it can be ongoing as well. If you have a score in right now and you go through either a 171 POAM process or you start on the CMMC and you find yourself that you're raising that level of maturity over time, you can resubmit at any given time your SPR, your 171 score in the SPRS.
Excellent point. Thanks, David.
Hey, James, I can tell you from experience, not all the contracting offices even know about this. You can show them the clause and they're still asking you, what is this? Why do we need to help you with this? Because they have to basically sign off on your request. So going direct to the Navy may be the only way you can do it, because we've run into a couple contracting officers that even when we explain it to them, they're not aware of it and they don't know what to do about it. So just information.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Okay, so the next question or discussion point that we want to go over is, what are the actual remediation steps to bring your score to a 110? Now, I understand that if you're going to go for a level 3, there's actually 130. So we need to expand it from 110 to 130 if you're going to go through and get the level 3 requirement. So anybody want to jump in and kind of discuss the remediation steps for this, please?
I'll take the bait on that one. Okay, so and interestingly enough, I've done a couple of 171s and a couple of CMMCs already, and what we find is you kind of if you're working on one, you need the other. I mean, that's one. So and something that James had just said is very poignant, which is you have 130 practices, but keep in mind that NIST and CMMC level 3 are radically different, and the reason is it's not just a checklist like you're used to with the 171. 110 practices on the 171, you either do or you don't. You have the 171A, which provides you the guidance on exactly what an assessor would look at or what you should be looking at as you go through each of those items. When it comes to CMMC, you now have 130, or CMMC level 3, you now have 130. But you also have 3 extra items that really is not included in 171. One is you have to have a policy that covers each of the 17 domains of the CMMC level 3. You also have to have practices. And I go back, I call the policies are the wills and the shalls. You must do this. You shall do this by penalty of, you could be, HR in trouble or, or dismissed. So that's your policies. Practices, this is the how. How do you do these things? How do you do each of those 17 different activities, or all the practices in each of the different 17 domains? And then finally, a resource plan. Resource plan is what I call a fancy RACI: responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. And so basically it's the who does it. And so not only do we have this list of practices, 130 for the CMMC level 3, 110 for the 171, but for CMMC level 3, you now have these 3 items that you have to have as well. And the point of that, and the intent of the CMMC level, or CMMC generally, but CMMC level 3 specifically, is that the cybersecurity maturity is actually seeping into your organization's culture, and that they will be able to see these things, and people are having to read them and acknowledge that they've read them, and being able to understand the practices and who's responsible for what, much more than just the 171 checklist.
Excellent, thank you. So in other words, a recap is no POAMs.
That is correct. No POAMs.
So how does an organization actually step through and remediate and mitigate the POAMs?
Some of those things may need to be outsourced. Some of those things can be done in-house if they've got the resources. But from what I'm noticing, a lot of these small businesses do not have those resources. So it's suggested that these small businesses and other companies reach out to, review the CMMC AB marketplace and find an RPO or an RP that fits your agency and see how they can help and supplement those gaps that you might have. There's a lot of resources out there. There's some automated tools there, and of course, many individuals and companies that are out there willing to help.
Absolutely, and that's going to be an additional discussion point a little bit later that we want to bring up from some of our members on this board that can actually assist you with that engagement from a remediation aspect to an actual assessment and audit. So we'll get to that a little bit later, but let's kind of step through that process and timeline that the CMMC AB has actually outlined for us. And it does start with the actual company, the organization that needs an actual CMMC certification to perform work with the government. Okay. The first step is obviously making sure that their environment is already mitigated, POAMs are removed, everything's implemented so that they can have an actual RP come in and do that initial assessment. Okay. What is the next step behind that?
This is once everything has been remediated and all controls are in place.
Correct.
At that point, it's going to be reaching out and finding if the organization has already gone through the gap and remediation assessment, reaching out and finding a C3PAO, that certified third-party assessor organization, and then going through the process of actually undergoing the official assessment, and where the assessing organization is going to do just a traditional audit against whatever level that they're seeking to be certified at between levels 1 and 5. In the case of the example we used of level 3, going through each of those 130 controls, verifying 2 forms of evidence, and that could be either performing the interviews for all the business function leaders, verifying what's in place, but then also having that physical documentation, whether it be policies, any of the procedures, or actual screenshots and evidence just to support all of those controls. And at that point, if there's no issues, nothing else that needs to be mitigated, the C3PAO would issue their opinion to the CMMC accreditation body, saying that they recommend them for certification, and then it would be up to the accreditation body to verify if that's accurate, and they would be the ones to issue the certification.
Absolutely. So it's not the C3PAO that's going to issue the certification. It's going to be the CMMC AB board. So that absolutely makes sense. It's upon them to say, yes, all the information that has been collected based on that, client and all those controls, it looks good. We're ready to issue the certification. Can the RP and the C3PAO or the RPO state to the client that you're going to pass the certification?
Not if they want to keep their license.
Okay, so there's no guarantee that you're going to pass. Even if you have all the controls in place, there may be something that the CMMC AB organization does not agree with on one of those controls. So keep that in mind. The RPOs, the C3POs, the RPs, the CPs, the certified assessors, they cannot guarantee that you're going to pass. The goal is to get you there so you can pass, but can't guarantee it.
I'd even take that a step further, James. Once the certified assessor, the C3PAO, does their recommendation, there is a quality control step at the CMMCAB where there's a quality assessor that goes through to make sure that the C3PAOs and the CAs are actually performing quality work as well. So there's multiple steps in. So, Ben may be doing a great job as a certified assessor, and he turns his stuff in, but maybe you can look and see that the quality assessors may look and there could be something that they find that may be off and have to go back and maybe do a little rework or do a little more information gathering to make sure that it meets the criteria.
Excellent point.
And I think it's worth noting too, so I know we talked about when either removing the POAMs and doing the remediation. So whichever, if it is a third-party company doing that remediation, that cannot be the assessor organization. Those have to stay completely independent. And in that, once remediation is done and the C3PAO comes in, it's fairly black and white. But if the organization, the assessor organization notices there's one very small, let's say the wording in a policy needs to be adjusted, the assessor organization cannot help with any remediation, but they can say, this is what would need to be fixed in a very small way. It can't be anything significant, but the accreditation body has said, if there is something tiny that would prevent them from passing, and it's just, something very insignificant, that can be adjusted before it's that evidence is provided to the accreditation body for review. Similarly, if it gets to them for review and they notice something very tiny, that's the difference between passing and failing, they can send it back and say, you don't fail, but this is what you need to change in order to pass. Now, if there is, glaring things that need to be updated or fixed, first they'll say, why are you even presenting this to us for certification? But also they're not going to say, just fix this, this, and this, and you pass, unless it's something very tiny. So it's not a complete pass or fail, but there's not going to be a lot of wiggle room from what we know so far.
Excellent points. Thank you very much for expanding on that. Much appreciated. So again, if it does come down to the CMMC AB board saying that, you don't quite pass, but you don't quite fail, there is an actual adjudication process within the CMMC that goes back to the organization seeking certification so that you can actually achieve your maturity level. So there is that process, and it's approximately a 90-day cycle. And that's just to assist your organization in being able to come into that compliance that you need and gain that certification. So they have added some additional steps and layers to make sure that you're on your way to that actual certification.
And James, on a note on that, if we look at this holistically, and I think Ben touched on it with the evidence-based, two forms of evidence. As if we look at it and kind of break these into segments, right? You find that you are a organization seeking certification in an OSC, and you engage with maybe an RPO that's helping you become ready to do those remediation steps. To get all the boxes checked, so to speak. It would behoove you to engage an organization that will help you, guide you, and enable you to be able to gather that evidence during that process and know exactly where it's at, exactly what it is, and the level of duty or level of care necessary to get it to that level that when finally you get to a certified assessor, they would immediately recognize it and be able to accept it as as part of the process.
Excellent. All right. So, any other comments on this particular topic? Anything from a legal standpoint that we need to make sure that we are abiding by?
This is Josh. It's interesting. The process is, I think a lot of folks are going into this sort of with high hopes and expectations. But at the end of the day, this is going to be the gateway to being able to win and be a subcontractor on government contracts with the Department of Defense. And as it looks like DHS and some other agencies might be following suit. So this is going to drastically shape, the DIB, so to speak. And I think it echoes what Amanda was saying earlier with, getting involved with folks who are understanding of the process and what type of evidence is required, as David mentioned, because, at the end of the day, at least according to the regulation as written, this is going to be required at the time of the award. And so, contractors need to, be thinking about that if they are running up against something, they want to make sure that they've done everything they can on the front end so that they're not delayed any longer. Because if they don't have the requirement by the time of award, they might lose out on an opportunity. And I think it just underscores the need for everyone to be, exercising diligence when we're doing this process, because it's not like a 1 week turnaround and you're suddenly CMMC 3 ready to roll. There's a lot of work that needs to go in, which is unfortunate for small businesses, but it's just there's a lot of things that folks need to be thinking about. And I know that to echo what, I can't remember who was saying it earlier, even folks within the Department of Defense are still kind of coming to grips, like, this is a new requirement. We have the CMMC coming up, but you also have this sort of parallel requirement for the DIB assessment. And so all this stuff is kind of coming to head. So from that perspective, folks need to just be mindful that this is not slowing down anytime soon.
No, and the best,
This is Bill. Can I chime in on that a little bit?
absolutely.
So we've been working with a lot of different companies recently, all different sizes, and the one of the biggest things that we are one of the biggest trends we're seeing is disbelief that this will ever happen. It is going to happen. We had one company say, I'm just not going to do it. I'll just have my partners do it, and then I'll just do theirs, which you can't do. It's an individual qualification. And then we've had other folks say that they see this and they go, man, if I'm going to be competitive, I've got to get this done now. And then one of our prime contractors, we had a meeting with them the other day. This was about 2 weeks ago. And before we even started the conversation, they said, where are you on CMMC? And so what took place, and I don't know if anyone mentioned this earlier, but they had a meeting with a lot of the large prime contractors in the government about CMMC. And at one point, when the government was asking them, how are you going to get your subs? Are you, they asked us, this is Mantech, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin level companies. And they asked them, are you guys going to pay to get your subs qualified? And they all resoundingly said, absolutely not, that they're not going to do that. So there is a big misconception out there with a lot of folks that just don't think they have to actually do this. And, that's the, our company we're doing it ourselves right now. And Rich is working on that with David, but this is a requirement. And that is the biggest learning point out there. It's going to be a requirement. It is now. And then it is, and I'm not sure, I think it was Joshua mentioned that it is not an overnight thing. And so it's going to take a process. And what I see happening is companies getting too far into the queue, and they're going to lose potential revenue because they're not going to be able to bid on contracts. That's my 2 cents on that.
Absolutely. And the government has already signed a contract directly with the CMMC AB board to get this process moving and developed and implemented. So it is coming down the pipe. The question is, for each company, how long do you think it will take in order for your organization to become certified? Well, that depends on a lot of different components. It depends on the size of your organization. Are you a hybrid solution, a cloud solution, or an on-prem solution? Do you have multiple locations? Do you have X amount of personnel? Is it 25 or is it 500 or 2,000? How many endpoints do you have? Who's going to be required to have CUI access? So it's a bucket of information flow that needs to be brought from the company to the organization that's going to help certify you, and that details the length of time it's going to take for your organization to get to that certification get through that certification process.
Yeah, James, and to that point, I mean, what we're finding since we're going through it is it comes down to, I'll make up a word, right? The least viable enclave, right? So what's the smallest enclave that you have to build to cover your CUI for your company? Because in our case, we have a lot of work that isn't CUI or doesn't deal with DoD at all right now. And so I think that timeline and that end cost, it revolves around, how much of an enclave do you need to build and how big does it need to be and what needs to be in it? And those are key factors. And I'm not saying we know the answer yet, but I know that that's part of the process is to figure that out.
Sorry, joined a little bit late. This is Kyle Lai. So what we're seeing is quite a few of our customers, there are subs. Some of the subs already getting a lot of letters from the prime say, where is your NIST 800-171? have you submitted SPRS, and where is the rest of the 20, right? 20 additional between NIST 800, 171, and CMMC. Have you looked at it? Are you prepared? Start preparing. And yeah, so that's what we're seeing. And just last week, I think one of the prime contractor already got the letter from the DoD. It's like, hey, if you don't have a SPRS submission, you cannot bid. So I think this is really coming down the pipe, and people are really paying attention. And I think they already selected 10 contracts for Pathfinder this year so far, 10 out of 15 already. So yeah, this is definitely coming.
And to expand on that, so the government only has direct control or direct, let's say, leverage on the prime contractors, and the prime contractors basically rule, let's say, their sub contractor ecosystem. And so what we're also finding as we've engaged with different organizations that sit under different prime contractors, there are some that are more aggressive. There are some that are immediately saying, what are you doing right now? There are some that have absolutely no idea what's going on. Just, I mean, that's the range of what's happening. What we're trying to do is get in and advise folks the best that we can. And I say the best we can with real information, real actionable information, ultimately out of the gate. If you don't have your 171 in right now, do it, because it's a requirement. And as Rich had indicated, there's some that are, you know, have no idea, or they're not letting us put it in because our contracting officer has no idea what we're talking about. All the way to the other side, where I actually had one customer that I had inquired to them about their 171. They actually went to their prime. Their prime was like, oh yeah, wait. And now all of a sudden they're into this cycle of, we need our 171 score. We need to get in quickly, or actually building their SSP for them as well as a POAM. So you're going to fight a wide range. And for the folks on this call that are trying to get the best of information, if you don't have your 171 now, you got to get it, period, and get it quick, because it can be a differentiator, as the gentleman before me had just said. And then the other is, the good news is that's a build toward your CMMC, because NIST 171 wholly is like an uplift into the CMMC level 3.
The biggest challenges we're finding with all of our clients is really not being able to help our clients get the information they need, cross-map the ML1 or the ML3. None of that's so much the issue. The issue we're having a problem with is with CMMC and them getting and keeping up with us so that we can meet our clients' needs and not changing or redoing their education systems and or the requirements that we have to have. It was just fourth quarter of last year when the CMMC told us that we needed to have a 17021 ISO certification for the C3PAO. And once we got that done and we notified them, they said, oops, we forgot to tell you that's no longer the case. Now you need a 17020. And plus our RPs are going through the RP training again. So that's one of the issues that we're finding our biggest challenges are, is the CMMC AB ready to support us, to support the timeline that the DoD is pushing the primes on. I don't know if anybody else is seeing that, but that's what we're running across.
They had a town hall for the CMMC. I'm sorry, go ahead, Amanda.
No, I was just going to say the same thing. It's tricky to nail it down when it's ever changing. I mean, their requirements are changing, and therefore our training is changing, and the information that we relay to our customers is changing. So we all have to stay vigilant and flexible.
Well, and even in last Tuesday's town hall that we sat in, then they brought up the fact that they may change the certification issuance process through the CMM. The DoD brought changing it to the C3PAOs, which if that's the case, then the ISO 17020 is not the right ISO standard. So there's still a lot of stuff that's not in concrete yet that we're working through. And that's right where we're at with it. And we want to help our clients, but we can't help our clients because we tell our clients we can't even quote you, because even though we're blessed as an RPO to do your quoting, they may make a change on that yet. And they've asked us to hold off until we have some more things with these C3PAOs. So that's what we're up against. But it's the real challenge is when we're out there and our clients are being quoted by all these other people that aren't registered, and trying to keep our client base educated on what's going on is turned into a real full-time job, to say the least.
True.
Absolutely agree with you on that, Dana and Amanda. And then I think the other component is from a company aspect, you need to absolutely be aware of those that are saying that we can, implement the 800-171, we can get you up to compliance standard, but they don't even have any RPOs or C3. They don't have the C3PAO or the RPO designation, right, as an organization, and then they don't even have RPs or provisional assessors. That's what it is at this time, is provisional assessors versus the certified professional and certified assessor. If they don't even have those, it really behooves you not to engage with them, because they're not bringing the CMMC information to you from the AB board itself. So just a cautionary, just be careful on that. They may say, oh, it's only going to cost you $3,500 for us to do this and then do the implementation. We've seen where it's no way, and you're not, you get what you pay for, really, is what the bottom line is. So just, be very careful on that. Do your due diligence, be vigilant on bringing in somebody to perform these assessments and audits and implementation within your organization.
Just one side note here, because everybody know the process is going to take a long time, and sometimes things change. Your system will change, some of the process will change. So just make sure that it's knowing that it's a forward-looking process. So whenever there are things changes, you will need to incorporate into that before the actual assessment.
Absolutely. And then Dana and I and Steve were just discussing, I think it was yesterday or day before, I think it was yesterday, just from the aspect of a certified assessor actually has to have a member of the board from CMMC AB over your shoulder as you go through audits, and you have to go through, I think, 3 audits or 5 audits with them. That cost alone is $2,500 for that AB board member to sit with you going through that whole audit per day, plus travel and hotel and expenses and all that stuff. So there's no way, if I quoted you $3,500, but I'm paying him $2,500, and I have to sit in your organization to go through this whole assessment, and it's a 6-month assessment. I think that my cost is astronomical compared to what I'm charging you as the client being doing the audit for. So it really is concerning to us, and we just want to make sure that you guys understand that there is no cheap cost to this. The other component, however, though, and I want to make sure that you guys understand it, you are able to bill to the government through the contract with your prime, but it has to be figured out with your prime of how you're going to bill this to your client, and it may be over multiple. Steve?
Your video, Steve, your voice is not working. Your audio. Or Dana too.
Yeah, I think you guys are muted.
Can't hear you, Steve. You were on before.
I'll type it to him just a second. Your mute button is on.
Here we are. Now can you hear me? All
I
right.
hear you loud and clear.
So I don't know what I was going
to. Go ahead, Steve.
The how everyone, I mean, this is a community here. How is the very, very small organizations, at the end of the ecosystem, the end of the DIB group, that one person shop, how are they going to afford to get CMMC certified to that ML3 that the big is saying, the prime is saying you need to be ML3, and then how are they going to build a government if they don't get the contract? I mean, if you don't get the contract, how are you going to build a government for getting CMMC?
Hey, Steve, this is Bill, if I may. I think that is a wicked problem, and it's going to cause a lot of companies to fold up their flag and go home.
I agree.
Because it's very expensive. And one of the things I know that these guys have done is they found a way to do that very, I don't want to call it inexpensively, but for less expense for a smaller one, a tiered approach. But this is going to cause a lot of companies to fold their flag up and go home. Now, one of our friends, and he's doing a little bit differently, but he spent over $100 grand just to get his company ready to go. And he's not a giant company. He's a couple $1 million a year company, but he spent $100 grand and he's not even audited yet. So this is going to be the great equalizer in what we think is going to happen is when you are CMMC complete, your competitiveness is going to go through the roof.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we love to talk about charging the government for this. And sure, you can say you're going to do that, but in the end, if you bill it in too much, you're going to lose on price. So ultimately what's going to happen is every company that's going to do this is in essence going to take it out of hide and hopefully recoup that on a contract they win. But we all know, and like you mentioned, you may need this for 10 contracts and you may go 0 for 10 and then you just spend all that money out of your own pocket. And I think that's just the way it's going to be. I've heard rumors that you can put in for grants and all this stuff. Some folks have talked about that at different levels that I've heard. I haven't seen anything official. But the reality is this is going to be an expense that people are going to have to pay, just like if you hire someone to get your GSA schedule or you hire someone to get your service-able veteran-owned small business schedule. You know, to me, that's the same concept.
So this is Dana. I want to bring up the grant issue. The grants that we found that are available are not available federal level, they're available state level, and they're continuing education grants is what they're called. So in the state of Florida where we're at, you go to Career Source Florida. There's a lot of people in the middle of them who say that they represent Career Source Florida, but part of the grant process that's right in the application of Career Source Florida states you have to fill out the application yourself. So if you go there, the problem with that is that budget comes out in July of every year, and if you don't fill it out real quick, it'll disappear. But this entire CMMC process is a continuing education for all of your employees. So it's something to be aware of. And the other states have similar programs, but we've not found anything federally yet.
And yeah, and again, going back to the federal component, based on the contracts, they're saying that you have to actually justify the cost that you're adding to the overall contract in order to recoup some of those costs that you spent on the CMMC certification process. And then it's up to the government to say, oh, that's reasonable, it's allowable and acceptable. Yep, go ahead and move forward and keep that in there, and we'll pay you. But if there's another contractor that has a lower cost because they didn't put in the recoup funds, they're going to probably win the contract and you're going to lose out. So there is a lot of things that we still need to really think about, drive to get accomplished with the government, I guess you could say, and make sure that they do, at least help us recoup, whether it's, 25%, 50%, something like that. So we're going to try to be advocates of that within the NVSBC, with the government and with the CMMC AB organization. I'm, continually sending them emails and questions and, making sure that, they understand that, there are some concerns that the organizations and clients do have, and how can we, mitigate that and, give them a good feeling that this is going to work.
Some of the other things we heard on the town hall on Tuesday was that, and whoever else was in that meeting, if you could give your input, I'd appreciate it. It was our interpretation that they're going to start the pilot assessment programs, and they're going to start to do that with those first 15 contracts that they have. Some of the concern with that is that if they start to fall behind on those pilot assessment programs and they're already on Q1 or now which is going to be Q2 and it slides to Q3, that means all the other people in the queue that are for assessors that have been postponed until Q2 to become assessors can't even become assessors to get into the loop until that whole pilot program is done, which means the whole concept of having all these additional RPs and the 3P, C3POs, they may not be able to get the supply side in the marketplace if they're going to wait for that pilot thing. At least that was our interpretation. Does anybody have any feedback or addition they want to say on that, please?
Yeah, so I was on the town hall, and there are at least one customer. They are not sure if they are going to be, because on the published contract, right, public contract, they are going to be on the Pathfinder, on the pilot, but they are not sure if their primes are actually going to be bidding or if they are going to be involved. So there are just a lot of uncertainty. And to your point, I think there are a lot of companies that are going to be bidding, but they are expecting 100 companies per contract, right? And if you're counting the subs, maybe there are going to be more. So in terms of the process of getting people certified, yeah, it seems like they're going to be falling behind, in my opinion.
That's our fear. Now I'll just
Yeah.
put it as the word fear, because that'll slow the process down.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people ready to go, but they'll have to wait. So yeah, there is just a lot of uncertainty, in my opinion.
One of the things that I do want to say that I think CMMC is really doing their best, and they're trying to get on top of this and learn what it is. But when it comes to the ISO side, they made some comments on Tuesday that they're going to have to do some research on. They brought up the fact that they're waiting to get their accreditation, and that some of the people out there on the C3PAOs that are going to get a 17020 may want to hold off to look for an accreditor. They don't realize this yet, but they can't do that. If you are going to be certified under an ISO 17021 or ISO 17020, you have to find an accreditor to get your actual audit done, or else you are not accredited and you are not able to issue. And that conflicts completely against ISO, and it's going to be a real credibility issue for CMMC, which they haven't figured out yet. So
Yeah.
anybody that wants to be a C3PAO, if they need implementation training, we can do your implementation training for the 17020 or INDO 21 if they change back to it. And we can recommend an accreditation body who we've used. So my recommendation is I wouldn't go down that C3PO path without it, because we know that they came back and had you do recourse training again, and they could do it in this particular case. Steve, you can elaborate on that because you know it way better than I do.
And it was really difficult. We went through the process. We busted our tails, spent many labor hours to get it accomplished for 17021. We had an assessment performed on us, and then we had some non-conformances. We had to work and clean that up, and then we got that done. Then we went to another assessment company to ensure. We went to a peer review assessment company, and we got an assessment done. And we just, what was it, yesterday, day before, passed our 17021, and that was months in the making, months. And now, in the meantime, we busted our tails to get 17020, and next week, the assessment for us is going to happen on that. So, you know, we are right there on it, but we've had the experience. We've implemented ourselves, okay, and we went through the rigor of assessment by a third-party assessment company hitting us. I mean, I shouldn't say hitting us, but evaluating us.
Yeah, so it sounds like we just have to be patient with the CMMC board as they continue to architect this all out. I understand that it's a bit of an up and down. I know that they're working through it. And I'm glad they're having the town meeting so that they're relaying a lot of this information to say, you know, we're working on this piece, we're fixing this. This has been a component that we've have concern about. And that's what we're trying to do, is bring those issues and concerns to, you know, enlighten the rest of the audience so that, you know, they're spun up and, you know, they have the information moving forward. With that said, let's go ahead and start asking some or answering some of the questions. And I'm going to hand this over to Earl, since I believe he has the questions. I can't quite see them. So Earl, if you can jump on and start asking the different questions that the audience is asking, I'd be grateful.
Sure. I'm just let you know I'm a little upset that I'm not James Quilty on this call. So we need every.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm
Same
showing
here.
I am James Quilty.
Okay, first question.
It's the Quilty bunch.
From Derek. He asked, do companies that do not have DFARS 252-204-7012 in their contracts have to submit an 800-171 score to SPRS.
Yes, yeah, let me jump on that. Yes, that is actually a amendment. So there's an interim default rules 7019 and 7020, which means that you do need to, if the, well, let me back it up. There is a new contracts. Contract officers are informed, instructed to put in these new defaults, right, 7019, 7020 into the contracts that's coming out. So if you see them, yes, then you will have to, you'll have to submit, make sure that you have the score, the information submitted to the SPRS. If you don't have that information, they cannot award you, or you probably cannot even bid on those contracts. However, with that said, you probably want to kind of get ahead of, because you're required to have the system security plan and POAM in order, and get your score in place before you can submit. So you probably want to get started on that as soon as possible, because that's coming, and our customer already got that push from their contract officer, and the contract officer kind of mentioned it. So just so you know, you have a 5-year contract, and your option year is coming up. They are going to review that with you, and if you don't have the SPRS score, the score in the SPRS, they will not give you the option the renewal.
Okay, great. Next question is from Toby Calvo. If we simply sell medical products to the federal government, what level CMMC do we need?
That should be outlined in your contract that comes with the DoD. We don't ever make recommendations to people which one they need, because it's going to be outlined within the contract itself. So I would recommend to go back to your contract officer and ask them what they estimate it to be, because anybody on this board, I think, knows better than to answer that question. It's just too scary. We don't know.
Okay, great.
I'll echo sort of what Kyle was mentioning, but a lot of contracting officers are still getting up to speed on this, as is the entire industry. They might be putting these clauses in your contract, but for example, the -7019 clause, which is the provision. So there's the -19 is a provision and -20 is a clause, but it says, in order to be considered for award, if the offer is required to implement 171, then you have to have a current assessment, which is the NIST DoD assessment, right? But the Department of Defense is supposed to be marking these things and telling you what has controlled unclassified information and what's subject to it, right? But that is a whole another ball of confusion. The other side that I think has produced a lot of confusion is the language, and the rule also talks about commercial items versus exclusively COTS items, and the carve out if it's exclusively COTS. And so you have to talk with to what I think Dana was saying. Talk to the contracting officer, find out where you're at, read the rule obviously, and then see if what you're providing to the government is exclusively COTS. Because if it's not, it will apply. But then the question is what level you're at, right? But I think this goes back to the beginning of the conversation. The CMMC right now is only applicable to the contracts that have been selected. So, but the contractors still need to be aware of this other nebulous DoD assessment rule, which may or may not apply depending on if you have to protect controlled and classified information under NIST SP 800-171. So there's like a lot of moving parts here. So I think paying attention, getting a copy of the rule is important, and then talking with and just being open with your DoD counterpart will be critical, because like I think as evident by the town hall, there's just a lot of things happening simultaneously, and not everything is exactly clear, which is, again, one of the issues here. But going back to the rule, you know, at least the 7019 clause says if you're required to implement NIST SB 800-171. So, you know, that is a question in and of itself, because sometimes the COs don't necessarily know whether or not it does apply. They're just putting it in the contract. That's
Okay.
I'm going to back up on that a little bit. Just a reminder for those on the line, contractors are not able to designate information as CUI. So you always have to go back to your government representative and follow up with that to verify what is CUI and make sure that you're protecting it accordingly. So always go back to your government personnel.
Okay. Next question is from Mr. Jeff Ellis. How are you guiding the clients whose 171 score may be reflected at less than 110 max score? Some seems to be comfortable with merely having a score in CPRS, regardless of what the score is.
Yeah, I think for our clients, I think they really have to just do a prioritization, because there are going to be a lot of work need to be done, right? So you have to prioritize, and usually you can, you know, update your score as well, right? As you work through your problems, remediation, the POEM items, you can update your score. So you probably want to identify some of the items that's kind of a big ticket item, low hanging fruit, and the big ticket items. You know, there are some items that have the associated score of 5. If you can knock out a few of those and that they are easy for you to implement, I think those are probably something you probably want to start with. But if there are things that are going to be taking a little bit long time, require a little bit more planning, yeah, you probably want to give yourself a little bit more time to plan out. And obviously, you can also, I think earlier we talked about interviewing some of the MSP, right, managed service providers, if they can take on some of those, you know, hard for you to manage items. Yeah, if they can take on those items for you, and for you to focus on something you can do, yeah, that might be a strategy as well.
I'll add one additional thought to that. If you're dealing with a prime contractor, you may want to discuss these obligations with them, because they might say, hey, look, we know you're a small business and you're just getting off the ground, but, you know, we want to see a minimum score of X, you know, because we need to, you know, they have to, you know, I mean, they're the prime, they're the one who's in privity with the government. The other side of the coin is, if you're a small business and you're going to be priming contracts, you have to take into consideration the fact that someone is way ahead of you and has a score of 110 or maybe even a 65, right? And because they've taken the time to get up to speed. Now, if you're going into the procurement and your score is 10 or -8 or whatever it may be, depending on the weighted scheme, it's entirely possible, given agencies' deference, to say, hey, look, there's a little bit more risk because this person doesn't have a higher score than this person. And then when they add that to the evaluation methodology, if they do, or if they just use a risk assessment, I mean, that's entirely possible. So there are market influences at play that suggest that you need to, you know, it's not just set it and forget it and wait till CMMC comes, right? Like, there's other people who are doing their diligence to ensure that they can point out in their, you know, proposals that we've taken cybersecurity seriously. We're almost finished with our 110 requirements under 800-171. So, I mean, that's something to be thinking about, isn't just getting a number in the system. And oh, by the way, even if you do put a number in, the difference between CMMC and the 800-171 assessment is you have a POAM on the assessment side with no POAM on the CMMC side. So when you're implementing that score, you're still having to say the date that you have planned on achieving the remaining items, which is sort of another aspect of it that's different than the CMMC. So something to be aware of. Again, lots of moving parts here, so hopefully that clarifies that.
Okay, great. This next question is from John. wouldn't using a education grant to get a CMMC certification for a business be a fraudulent use of the grant?
I think that's going to come down to the stipulations within that grant.
I agree with that. It depends on the language of the grant, I suppose. I won't comment beyond that.
Okay. Okay, this next question is from Yvonne. Would VARS, who deals in only hardware requires to meet CMMC requirements, or is it irrelevant to it's written in the contract?
Can you repeat what's the acronym in the beginning?
VAR,
VARS.
value added reseller. I think that would go into the realm of commercial off the shelf, and I definitely don't want to get into the details of that because it gets swampy. I would recommend, I don't know if Joshua has something on this, but they do differentiate between commercial off the shelf and products and services provided, let's call it custom. So that's definitely an area you'd want to research and get with your contracting officer on to have them have a decision on where you sit specifically in that and what the requirements would be.
Yeah, so the language in the rule, and again, I point to the rule, says the CMMC applies to all acquisitions and contracts, including those for commercial items, except for exclusively COTS, commercial off the shelf, which is a variant of a commercial item. So going to the FAR, finding whether or not your product fits within any of those definitions, and then moving forward. I think this one issue is something that is on DoD's mind because I think a lot of folks have brought it up and they want clarity on it. So, and as a reminder, the DoD published an interim rule. So the final rule that they publish could be amended and contain, more clarifications, which is what we're all kind of, I think, hoping for. But that's sort of the lay of the land right now. And, I know a lot of large companies are very interested for clarity on this specific exclusively COTS versus commercial off the shelf issue, right?
Yeah.
But,
Absolutely agree with you, Joshua, on that. And because it's also part of the supply chain and it's potentially CUI because you have a organization you're delivering to, it could be a ship, a US Navy ship, right? If you have the dates and everything that's available open to the public, then they know when you're going to deliver a specific product. They're not supposed to know that, right? And that's some of the components that Navy is coming down and saying, okay, well, all of this is CUI because it's going to a ship, specifically a ship at this time by this vendor with this driver, et cetera. So we were waiting for some additional information to come down the pipe to designate, yes, for sure. And especially if you're talking nuclear, right? And that appliance is going to be implemented to help solve a problem on a ship that is nuclear. So there's a lot of things that we have to take into consideration when it comes to VARs, hardware, software, COTS, GOTS, all of that stuff. So more coming down the pipe, and we'll let you know as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'll just tell you, our experience so far with particularly Navy and Marine Corps is everything CUI. You ask them and they say everything is. If you're touching any government information, it's CUI, and that's the answer we're getting.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of
that's
what
the thing
selling
that's
or
been,
not.
and that's the problem with the way that the CUI framework is working is they're going to think, what do I need to do? Let's just make it CUI, right? Even though it's supposed to be in charge of determining which documents contain CUI, I mean, you can see where how this is going to play out in practice, where I think level 3 is going to be something that folks are, going to be needing, especially if that's what the Marine Corps is saying. I don't know about any other agencies, but.
Yeah, so David, Joshua, just to jump on there. So David and I were talking, and I can give you a specific example. So we had a contract with Headquarters Marine Corps, and we had the conversation, and they said, if you have a government person's name and email together at CUI.
Okay, that was the last question.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining today's session on CMMC with NVSBC. And we'll let you know when the next panel discussion is going to be scheduled. It should be, I believe, next quarter. We should have some more information since we are attending the town halls with the CMMC AB board, and we'll provide that information as it comes out. Thank you for attending, and thank you to the panelists for answering a lot of the questions. And those that joined us, thank you so much for attending. Have a great day and see you next time.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks.